we are going to learn the first two types of factoring. They're pretty similar. Anyway, I guess let's start off with the idea of what factoring is, because before you can learn how to factor, we absolutely have to understand what factoring is. Factoring is the opposite of foiling. And I think I have this written at the top of every single notes for the rest of the chapter. Remember, factoring is the opposite of multiplying, which is foiling. Now, whenever we talked about this last week, I said that factoring is the opposite of multiplying, but it was the opposite of the distributive property. Because the distributive property is multiplying. The FOIL method is multiplying. Okay, there's two different ways to multiply, the distributive property and then the FOIL or the box method. Okay, the distributive property is pretty easy to undo. Now, for a foiling problem, there's a bunch of different ways to factor. So, what we're going to start off by doing is, since factoring is the opposite of foiling, every time I teach you a new way to factor, we're going to start by looking at how it multiplies first, because a lot of times if we can see, okay, well, if this is how it multiplies, all I'm doing is going back the other direction. So what we're going to start doing is we are going to look first at this x plus 4 times x plus 6, and we're just going to FOIL it out. So for the f, the first terms would be x times x, which is x squared. Okay, the o, the outside terms, would be x times 6, which would be 6x. The I, those inside terms, right there, the ones right next to each other, 4 times x would be 4x. And then the L, the last terms in both sets of parentheses would be 4 and 6. You would take 4 times 6, and you would get 24. And then remember, usually what happens, what we're going to find out is for these types of problems, the O and the I, for these types of problems, are always going to be able to combine together. 6x plus 4x is 10x. So your answer would be x squared plus 10x plus 24. Okay, we spent 2 or 3 days doing the FOIL method. We did the FOIL and the box method, and we talked about the special cases, and we just practiced all of those together. So we've done a lot of practice with foiling. Okay? What we are doing today is we are going back the other direction. Today, you are going to have the answer to a foiling problem. Your job today, and for the rest of this factoring chapter, is to figure out what would I FOIL out to give me that back. Kind of like with the distributive property, right? I said if I had 3x plus 6, I was like, okay, there's something on the outside and then something on the inside. You just gotta kind of fit together the pieces, okay? We're doing this same thing here, okay? So, the more you understand foiling, I'm gonna go back and forth between the foiling and the factoring a lot, because the more you understand foiling, the more you're going to understand factoring, okay? So, we're kind of visualizing here. I'm FOILing something out, okay? These are some of the easiest ones to do. Because the f, when I multiply these two things together, my f is x squared. And there's only one way to get x squared. It has to be x times x. Where what we're going to do tomorrow, if we're in school, it's not going to be just an x squared. But the only way to get x squared is x times x. So you already know how to get the f. You already know how. What you have to figure out is what numbers are going to go in the rest of the parentheses. Now, if I were to look at really any type of problem, now assuming that it's x's, it's not some kind of weird variables or anything like that. If it's always going to be an x squared, okay, which means this is going to be x times x, really the only other two things that change are this number here and this number here. So if we can think, okay, well, the 24, okay, the 24 is my L in my FOIL method. And if we think about, well, where does that L come from? That L is when you take these two numbers and you multiply them together. Okay? So in order to make that 24 be the L, I know that these two numbers have to multiply to give me 24. Here's the thing. There's a lot of things that equal 24. So what I like to do, because this is going to happen a lot, I kind of like to come up with a little T-chart. And I say, okay, what I'm looking for is I'm looking for numbers that multiply to give me 24. And there's a bunch of them, right? You could do 1 times 24. You could do 2 times 12. You could do 3 times 8. You could do 4 times 6, and then it would cycle back around, right? These are all of the things that you can multiply to give you 24. Okay? Here's the thing, and don't write this down, but if I did 1 and 24, if I did x plus 1 and x plus 24, 1 times 24, that'd give me 24. Here's the problem. I'm trying to FOIL something out, so I get a 24 for the L, but the O and the I are going to combine together to give me 10. So if I find the O here, it would be 24x and 1x. 24x and 1x gives me 25x. See how it doesn't match? See that? Okay. Well, if I try the next one, maybe I try x plus 2 and x plus 12. 2 times 12 gives me 24. But the O would be 12x and 2x. 12x plus 2x gives me 14x. See the problem here? Okay. Now, what turns out that happens here, if these are just x's, the O and the I, notice it was a 24x and a 1x, 24 plus 1. You just added these together. And then 2x and 12x. That's just what they're going to be because the other thing that you're multiplying it by is just an x. So if it is just an x, it's really easy to find your middle term. It's really easy to find your middle term. If I did 1 and 24, okay, I know that my middle term would be 25. This is what's going to go in that other column. And how you're going to find these is you're going to add them together. Now what I need them to add together to be is 10. So we already saw that 2x and 12x would give me 14x. Now I don't even have to plug them in, but if you plugged in x plus 3 and x plus 8, guess what your middle term would be? 11x, which is not 10. But if I did 4x and 6x, those are the ones that you want. So your answer is x plus 4 times x plus 6, which I knew because, I mean, that's what I started with. Okay? But we're not going to have that today. We're just going to start with this one. Okay? So, these are the problems because we're going to start talking about a bunch of different types of factoring, so we have to be able to keep the different types separate. So, these are what I call x squareds. Okay? So, if you look at just kind of the generic form of this, it is x squared. Because remember, I said the criteria here is that your f is just an x squared. That makes things really easy when your f is just an x squared. And then remember that I said the only difference between these is that number in front of x, which we're going to call b, and then that last number, which we're going to call c. So your c is your L. The b is going to be the O and the I after you combine them together. What you have to do is kind of piece these two things together. The f is easy to figure out. We're going to get the f every single time by taking x times x. Now, to get the L, to get the c, we are going to multiply things together to give me c. So what we're doing with these ones, we're looking for factors of c, things that multiply together to give you c. But those same two numbers have to add to give you b, which is going to be the O and the I, after they combine together. So this is kind of the phrase that we're going to use for this section. Look for factors of c that add to b. Factors of c, things that multiply to give you c that add to b. So let's try one of these. Now where the c and b comes from, remember? Okay, this is x squared plus bx plus c, without the 5 and the 6 in there. Okay? So if I wanted to factor this, if I gave you this problem, x squared plus 5x plus 6, I said factor this. It doesn't matter if you have no idea how to do these problems. If you have no idea where to start, the one thing you should be able to do, you know your answer is a foiling problem. Your answer for every single problem today looks like this. Every single problem is a foiling problem because that's what factoring means. What can I FOIL out to give me that back? Every single problem, your answer looks like this. Today, tomorrow, next week, because this is what factoring means. What can I FOIL out? What can I multiply together to give me x squared plus 5x plus 6? Well, if I'm going to FOIL this out, well, guess what? If my f is x squared, the only way you can get x squared is x times x. Every single problem today is going to be x times x. So even if you have no idea how to do the rest of it, every single problem you could do this. You could set up your two sets of parentheses, do x times x, and then come back and figure out the rest if you can't figure out how to make the rest of the pieces fit. Okay? Now, to figure out the rest of the pieces, you have to make the L fit in with the O and the I combined together. So once again, the L, where that 6 comes from, it was these two numbers that I don't know multiplied together. So I'm going to multiply numbers together to give me 6. Okay, that's my L. Now, those same two numbers, remember, this is going to be the O and the I. See how it's going to be something X and something X? They're both X's. So to combine them together, you would just add the number in front, which is these numbers here. Those same two numbers, after they combine together, are going to give me 5x. So those same two numbers have to add to give me 5. So start with the left-hand column. What are some things that multiply to give you 6? 2 times 3. Now, if you plug in a 2 times 3, I promise you without even foiling it out, your O and I are going to be 2x and 3x. 2x plus 3x, look at that. Gives me 5. These are the two puzzle pieces that you're trying to figure out. So your answer is going to be x plus 2 times x plus 3. Now that last step there, as I said, you can check by multiplying, and you don't have to actually FOIL the whole thing out, but these are really easy to check. X times x is x squared. The O is 3x and 2x, just like I said that would be, right? 3x and 2x, add to give me 5x. And then the L, 2 times 3, see how that's what we did in this column? Gives me 6. This is your answer right here. Okay, let's try this one. If I asked you to factor this, even if you have no idea what to do, you know your answer looks like this. You know your answer is a foiling problem. And you know that when you FOIL this out, you know your f has to be x squared. How are you going to get x squared? X times x. That's the only way I can get x squared. If you don't know how to do anything else today, you at least know how to do that. Because if I FOIL this out, x times x gives me x squared. Now I just got to figure out the rest of it. Okay? Now, to get the L, okay, remember where the L comes from. It is these two numbers multiplied together. Now be careful with the signs. These two numbers multiplied together need to give me negative 10. What are some things that multiply to give me negative 10? 5 times negative 2. Now here's the thing. If you plugged in x plus 5 and x minus 2, I promise you without actually FOILing it out, it would be a 5x and a negative 2x. A 5x and a negative 2x would give me a 3x for the middle term. I need, when I combine that O and I together, I need them to add to give me negative 3. How could I make that a negative 3? Make it a negative 5 and a positive 2. So your answer here is x minus 5, x plus 2. Once again, you don't have to actually FOIL it out and check every answer, but they're really easy to check. X times x is x squared. 2x, negative 5x, negative 3x. Negative 5 times 2 is negative 10. That's your answer right there. Okay? All right, let's get this glued into page 23. 3. This is section 8.5, and it is called factoring x squared plus bx plus c. Okay, right into factoring here. Okay, number 1, I want to factor y squared plus 6y plus 5. Y squared plus 6y plus 5. Now, here's what I was telling you, that even if you have no idea what I just told you, it made no sense whatsoever, you're like, I am so totally lost. Anytime I tell you to factor, it does not matter what the problem looks like. Anytime I tell you to factor, you can already do this. Because if I say factor, I'm asking you, what would you FOIL out to give me that back? This is the answer to a foiling problem. You're trying to come up with the original question. Well, if the f is just an x squared, or in this case, just a y squared, meaning it's not like 10y squared, 15y, it's just y squared. The only way you can get y squared is y times y. For every single problem today, you can at least fill that out. Every single problem is going to be y times y, x times x, q times q, f times f. It's just going to be an x squared. Now, to figure out the rest, I kind of like to look at the L first. So keep in mind, where the L comes from, it is these two numbers. The two numbers I'm looking for to try to fill in the rest of my parentheses. If I were to multiply those two numbers together, I need to get a 5. Which is kind of an easy fact to look at. There's not a whole lot of things that multiply to give you 5. Multiply to give you 5. What can you multiply? Yeah, 1 and 5. And guess what? If you do y plus 1 and y plus 5, your O and I are going to be 5y and 1y, which add to give me 6, which is what the O and I add together to give me. Now, it does not matter if you wanted to put the y plus 5 first. That's fine. Means the exact same thing. No worries there. Okay, number 2, let's do r squared minus 11r plus 24. Okay, once again, even if you have no idea where I'm getting these numbers from, this is making 0 sense whatsoever. If I say factor this, there we go, factor that. That's what your answer looks like. And even further, if I'm going to FOIL this out, there's only one way to get that f. How are we going to get r squared? R times r. That's the only way to get r squared. If you try to do something different, it's not going to work. Okay? Now, to figure out the rest of it, to get that L, remember, if I were to FOIL this out, I need that back. So the F, I've got it covered. Now, for the L, whatever these two numbers are in here, they need to multiply together to give me 24. Now, 24 has a lot of factors. We kind of listed them out already. What are some things that multiply to give you 24?
3.
Oh, wait, 3 and 8. Now, here's the thing. These same two numbers, when I combine the O and I together, the O and the I, okay, when I combine these together, they are going to add to give me negative 11. And 3 and 8 give me a positive 11. Now, if I did a negative 3 and 8, negative 3 times 8 would give me a negative 24, and would add to give me 5. How could I get a positive 24? Negative 3 and negative 8, they're both going to have to be negative. The way you get a positive answer when multiplying, they either both have to be positive or they both have to be negative, right? And negative 3 and negative 8 give me negative 11. So it's going to be r minus 3, r minus 8. Okay, number 3. Let's do w squared minus 7w minus 8. Okay, I'm hoping you already know what I'm going to say. You already know what your answer looks types of parentheses. It's a foiling problem because if I ever say factor this, you're looking for a foiling problem. My f is w squared. How are you going to get w squared? W times w. That part's easy. If you have no idea how to do anything else, you could set up every single problem doing this. Okay? Now to get my L, I'm going to multiply to give me negative 8. Now, at the same time, sometimes it helps. So I like to just think about the L first, but at the same time, I know that the O and the I, okay, the O and the I, something W and something W, they are going to add to give me negative 7. Okay, so don't worry about that right-hand column, just worry about the left-hand column. If I'm going to multiply two numbers together and get a negative answer, what kind of numbers are they going to have to be? One of them has to be negative, and one has to be positive. Those are different signs. So keep that in mind. What are some things that multiply to give me negative 8? Okay, 1 and 7. Now, what we said, sorry, no, 1 times 7, 1 times 8, right? One of them has to be negative. If I'm going to add to give me negative 7, which one of these needs to be negative? The 8. Right? Because the bigger number needs to be negative, they're going to add to give me negative 7. So this will be 1 plus, W plus 1, W minus 8. Okay, number 4. V squared plus 5V minus 36. Okay, I give you a problem and I say, factor this. You can already set up your answer. And you can already fill in half of these, right? What's going to need to go at the front? V times V is going to give me the V squared. Now, to give me the L, kind of like the last one, these two numbers, when I FOIL this out, the L, that last term, is going to be negative 36. So those two numbers multiplied together are going to give me negative 36. When I combine the O and I together, when I add them, I'm going to get 5. Now, like I said, try not to think about the right-hand side, especially 36 has a ton of factors. What are some things multiplied to give you 36?
6 and 6.
Okay, 6 and 6. Now keep in mind, one of them has to be negative because I'm going to multiply to give a negative. So no matter which of the 6's you do, that's going to give me 0. What else multiplies to give you 36? 9 and 4. One of them needs to be negative. The 5 is positive. The 4, right? Bigger number needs to be positive. This is going to be V plus 9. V minus 4. So sometimes you're going to have to write out a few factors, and I promise you, I think it helps to write them out because you can kind of eliminate some of the answers. Okay? Number 5, let's do t squared plus 10t plus 16. Okay, we can already go ahead and set up our answer, right? What's going to go in the front of my parentheses? T times t. Has to be. T times t is going to give me the f, the t squared. Now for the L, those two numbers, whatever they are, when I FOIL this out, they're going to multiply to give me 16. And then when I combine the O and I, they're going to add to give me 10. So what are some things that multiply to give me 16? 4 and 4. Now if you plugged in a 4 and a 4, it'd be 4t and 4t, which would give me 8t. Okay, I'm looking for a 10. What else multiplies to give me 16? 8 times 2. And 8t and 2t would give me 10t. So those are the ones we're looking for. T plus 8 and t plus 2. Okay, number 6, x squared plus 5x minus 6. All right, we can go ahead. We can set up our parentheses. I be x times x. These two numbers, to get that last term, they're going to multiply to give me, pay close attention to the signs, they're going to multiply to give me a -6. And the O and the I, those two middle terms, are going to add to give me a +5. What are some things multiply to give me 6? 4 times 2 is 8. What else? What multiplies to give me 6? Okay, we have 3 and 2. One of them has to be negative. Now, kind of thinking ahead here, if the sum is positive, the bigger number has to be positive. So that gives me 1. Thomas, would you say? Okay, 1 and 6. Which one's going to be negative?
6.
Now, if I did 1 and -6, I'd get -5. I need, right, see this? I need it to be a +5x. So it's going to have to be a -1 and a +6. X minus 1, x plus 6. Got to figure out all of those signs. Okay, is this making sense? Okay, I'm going to throw in one more thing to ponder. Word it that way. Okay, number 7. K squared plus 5kn minus 84n squared. Yikes. So this looks way more complicated because there's like 2 letters and all sorts of big numbers. Okay, it doesn't matter what it looks like, guys. You already know what your answer looks like. It's a factor. It's a foiling problem, because if I ever say I want you to factor something, it means it's a foiling problem. And guess what? You already know how to get the f. How do you get k squared? Look, you already know how to fill in half your parentheses. Now here's the thing. What makes this tricky is I do have the k squared. That part wasn't a big deal. But I've got this other variable here. I've got this n in the middle and this n squared at the end. Here's the thing. To get a k squared for my f, I had to do k times k. To get my L, it has to be an n squared. So in the same sense, how I'm going to make that a something n squared, it's just going to have to be something n times something n. That's the only way this changes. The only way. Everything else is still the same, because look at this. Your middle term is going to be a kn and a kn. When you combine a kn and a kn, look, you're going to get a 5. So they're going to multiply to give me negative 84n squared. And they're going to add to give me 5kn. Now, these ones may take a little bit, but it's going to be 12 times 7, okay, are going to be the 2 numbers. Now, since it's a negative 84, one of these needs to be negative. They're going to add to give me a positive 5. So the 7 has to be negative. It's 12 bigger, so it needs to be positive. So all that's going to be is k plus 12n, k minus 7n. The only way those change is that you have variables in the front and backs of your parentheses as well. Let's try another one of those. Okay, number 8 says p squared minus 8pq minus 33q squared. Okay, regardless how many variables or numbers or whatever, you already know what your answer looks like. And in fact, you already know how to get the f. How are you going to get the p squared? How are you going to get the p squared? Last one more time. How are you going to get the p squared? P times p. And guess what? For the L, how are you going to get the q squared? The same way. It's just going to be the last times the last is going to be something q times something q. Now that something q times something q needs to multiply to give me negative 33. And those same numbers, when you combine them together, are going to have to add to give me negative 8. What are some things multiply to give me 33? 11 and 3. Now, one of them needs to be negative. If it's a negative 8, which one's negative? The 11. So it's going to be P minus 11Q, P plus 3Q. Okay, I'm going to give you guys 2 that I want you to try on your own, and then I'll let you get started on your homework. Okay, so number 9, I want you guys to try t squared minus 10t plus 24, and then number 10, x squared plus 3xy minus 18y squared. Try those 2 on your own. Okay, I think a lot of you guys are still thinking, I know that I don't need to run, but I want you guys to be able to work on your homework. So, be really, really careful with the signs here. Okay, what I love is everybody had the 2 sets of parentheses, and we all knew it was t times t. Now, the big thing that I saw students trying, which once again, I love this. This is great, okay? 12 and 2 do multiply to give me 24. You got to figure out the signs, and maybe you're like, well, if I need to get a negative 10, I'm going to do a negative 12 and a positive 2. What's the problem with that? That would give me a negative 24. And even if I switch the signs or make it, it's not going to work. The 12 and the 2 aren't going to work. What am I going to need to use? A minus 6 and a minus 4. Right? Because they're both going to have to be negative. Okay? And the only way you can do that and add to give you a negative 10 would be a negative 6 and a negative 4. Now with this one, once again, even if you can't figure out the numbers, guys, at least do this. You know it has to be x times x. And you know for the L, you know it has to be y times y. If you can't do anything else, you could at least get started with this one, okay? That at least sets up your answers for you. Now what multiplies to give me negative 18 adds to give me 3. I saw a couple of people had it. What? I agree with the 6 and the 3. Let's figure out the signs. Right. The 3 needs to be positive, so the bigger number needs to be positive. So it'd be a positive 6 and a negative 3.